Welcome, I'm Sam Faddis. This is Ground Truth. We're going to be picking up today where we left off a week, 10 days ago, talking about sleeper cells inside the United States. And today's focus is going to be on what we do about this threat. Specifically, we're talking about possible Iranian sleeper cells inside the country while we're at war. To recap, when we're talking about sleeper cells, which is not really the technical term that would be used inside the intelligence community, but I'm going to use it because it's used commonly by average folks. We're talking about cells, operatives, undercover, here in alias, potentially here for a long time, even years, who are here for the purpose of doing harm. They're not just here to collect intelligence. They're here to carry out attacks, facilitate other people carrying out attacks. So, again, to recap, the Iranians have been in this business for a very, very long time. They have done this kind of thing successfully all over the planet. So there's nothing theoretical at all here. They have killed God knows how many thousands of people and staged massive attacks. And many of those attacks include being directed at us. So the other thing to understand is, that's history, but right now in the middle of this conflict, we can see that teams of Iranian operatives are being wrapped up all over the place. The Greeks, the Turks, the Cypriots, the Bahrainis, the Kuwaitis, the Qataris have all wrapped up in recent months teams of Iranian operatives on their soil carrying all sorts of, spy gear, for lack of a better term. In other words, cameras with lenses to allow them to take photography at some distance, GPS units so they can mark targets, and then secure communications with Iran. Most of it seems to be internet-based. In other words, they have computers and they can get on the internet, and they're not just emailing somebody. They have encrypted communications, this kind of thing. Sometimes you just log onto a website that looks innocent and upload files, and it's designed to be invisible. Point here is, this is happening. Teams of these guys seem to be roughly five seems to be the common size. 5 individuals seems to be the common size of these teams. And they are being picked up all around areas where there would be targets the Iranians would want to hit. So happening now, confirmed, not theoretical, and every reason on earth to think that the same kind of thing is happening inside the United States. Okay, so how do we counter that? What do we do about it? You're not talking about clowns. You're not talking about guys who arrive here and tell you who they are. Solid alias documents, backstopped. In other words, they'll stand up to scrutiny. They know what they're doing. They know how to avoid detection. So what do you do about this? Okay, well, the first thing you do about this is you recruit penetrations of the hostile intelligence services that are doing this. You want to know what sources the Russians are running inside the U.S. government. The best way to do that is recruit somebody inside the SVR, the Russian intelligence service, who's charged with doing that. Somebody inside their service, their intelligence agency, that'll tell us what they're up to. This is why Rick Ames, who was a CIA guy arrested years ago for spying for the Russians, was so incredibly damaging, because he was, in fact, a CIA case officer who was conducting operations against the Russians, and he knew the identities of our sources in Russia. So he was giving up those names to the Russians, and our sources were not just being compromised, they were being executed. The best defense is always a good offense. So the number one thing to do here is penetrate the Iranian intelligence service, the Iranian Quds Force, get sources inside there to tell us what they're up to. Not easy, not impossible either. Given the state of our intelligence collection capability, what's the likelihood that we have those sources? Unfortunately, not real high. So somebody ought to be really stepping on the gas and stepping up that game, because that is the number one defense. Second thing is what I call making book on their MO, on their method of operations. I just said we've seen a bunch of these teams wrapped up around the world. Okay, well then we need to gather every scrap of information about those teams, how they were operating, what kind of alias documents they were carrying, the types of equipment. Is it guaranteed that their guys inside the United States are going to operate exactly the same way? No. In an ideal world, you would constantly vary your method of operation. But the reality is there's going to be some commonality. If you have a source of alias documents so that your guys can masquerade as being from Azerbaijan, odds are pretty good that you're going to end up using those kinds of documents in more than one place. Same goes for your equipment, how you're paying for things, credit cards if they're in use, the banks in use, where the airplane tickets were purchased. Every little detail about how these guys were operating in Greece or Cyprus or wherever, we need to know, because that at least gives us the beginnings of a template for what we're looking for. And then armed with that, we need to go out and we just need to start hunting and setting up what I refer to as screens. One of the things we have seen these other teams and these other countries focused on is the American military, where our people are staying, where our bases are, and that means they are literally going in some cases and renting hotel rooms in hotels overlooking an American military installation, so they can get pictures, so they can be not standing on the street, obviously photographing things, but operating from what we would call an OP, an observation post. Okay, well, so therefore we can look at every potential target that these guys might be looking at, and then we can go and hunt for them around there. What's that mean? It means every hotel manager who runs a hotel that overlooks any of our U.S. Navy installations in the Norfolk area, somebody ought to have been talking to him, NCIS, somebody else, sensitizing them. This is what we're looking for. This is how these guys operate. If you see something, say something, but not just a general brief, but hey, this is my name, here's my business card, this is your contact number. You got anything that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, you got individuals with these kinds of documents with this kind of travel pattern, guys paying in cash, etc. Call me, let me know, advise me, and then we'll take it from there. And at the same time, doing similar kind of work in areas, in communities where you think these individuals might rent apartments and settle in for the long haul. You got 5 guys that are all Middle Eastern that arrived here with whatever kind of documents. Unlikely that they are going to go settle into some long-standing upper middle class neighborhood where nobody looks like them, nobody talks like them, where they stick out like a sore thumb. They're going to go to communities where they feel like they can blend in. So the same kind of screening activity needs to happen there, which means you need to be talking to shopkeepers and legitimate folks in these neighborhoods and saying, hey, look, this is what we're worried about. This is what the Iranians may be doing. Watch out for these people trying to blend in your community. That's why this kind of outreach to a whole variety of ethnic groups is really critical in this kind of work. Okay, what do you do when you pick up something? We got a guy and he's checked into a hotel and he's paying in cash and he's overlooking a naval base down in Norfolk and everything is matching and he looks like he could in fact be part of a cell. Well, the first thing is this: you don't arrest him. Do not default to law enforcement activity unless there's some indication that this is imminent, that we're about to see loss of life and destruction. The answer is you don't pick him up, you watch him. You've got a hold of a thread, now you pull on the thread. Maybe you go into his room when he's not around, search his room. Be very careful when you do that, because these guys are trained to know when somebody's been in their room. Physically surveil him, follow him around. Again, very carefully, because they're trained to detect surveillance, and the whole thing can go off the rails. The point here is get on his phones, get in his room, surveil him, again, with the appropriate degree of tradecraft. And what are we looking? What are we looking for? We're looking for him to lead us to the other members of the cell. We're looking for the part where he goes off and wanders around and then meets with 4 other guys in a cafe someplace, and they start talking and discussing. And then we're prepared, when they all split up and go back their separate ways, to surveil every single one of them back to wherever his bed down location is, and then set up the same kind of coverage on them. Grab that thread leads you somewhere to other threads. Pretty soon we're mapping out a structure. Pretty soon we're seeing the totality of what they're doing. And then at that point, ideally, you still don't arrest them. Or you arrest them, but not for the purposes of incarcerating them. You grab one of them and you give him a choice between spending the rest of his life in bars or potentially facing execution, or rolling over on his buddies and working for us. This is called doubling someone. Got this Iranian asset. He's on our soil. We got him dead to rights. His life is over. He's going to spend the rest of his life in hell, in prison, or he's going to sit in the electric chair in the not too distant future. Maybe this guy rolls. And now you're not just getting what you're getting from the outside. He's telling you what all the communications are that he's getting from Tehran. And even better, you're now in control of what he tells Tehran. If you want Tehran to think that target, that Navy base, is a soft target, because that will draw in an attack team and you can wrap those guys up, then you have the capacity to do that. You want Iran to walk on by and look somewhere else, then you have the capacity to do that. And from one of these doubles, potentially to more. He tells the Iranians, we're good to go. Send in the attack team to hit Norfolk Navy base. And when they arrive, you grab them and you double them. Now, all of this requires incredible discipline. It requires people who know what they're doing. And it's not easy. But to give you an idea of how effective this can be, during the Second World War, the Brits ran an operation which was called Double Cross. And they successfully turned and doubled every single German agent that was sent into the United Kingdom in the Second World War, so that they ended up in complete control of the Nazi apparatus inside the United Kingdom, and fed them fake targeting data and sucked in additional operatives who they also doubled, and incredibly effective. So not easy, but it can be done. And that's what we need to be doing now, not just hoping we get lucky, trip across a team and arrest one. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next time on Ground Truth.